Shalom! Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my premiere about a very interesting metal. It's gold. And you are probably saying to yourself, you know, what does Sister Kate care about gold? Obviously, I don't wear it. Obviously, we don't live a life that has much interaction with gold. Well, I'll let you know. It was on one of those trips, those long trips that Pastor Joe and I take, and we got somehow on the subject of gold, and I started doing research like I do and just found out some very, very interesting political and social and scientific facts and history about gold. And that's where I thought, I think I might like to share this. So that is where the impetus, the idea for these videos, or it may be more than one, I may be able to get it all out in one, this video that you're watching right now. And I do appreciate you coming around to check this out. And I also urge you to look up, do research of your own on gold. Hi! I keep trying to do the video and all these animals want to get in on it. He wants food. Anyway, let's get started. So one of the things about gold that's exceptional is its color. As a metal, most metals are like a silver or, you know, a gray, and it is that color we all know. And I had an example of something similar, just so we are on the same page. This is not real gold, but this is, you know, shiny, an example of what I'm talking about. And I was thinking about that last night. I thought, okay, so why would something that color be of interest to a human being? I mean, what is innate about it that attracts us? And I thought two things. Light, like the sun, and the sun means warmth, and also fire, because fire burns different colors, but, you know, a goldish yellow, white, yellow, red kind of thing is how, you know, the colors that fire is, and both of those things are warm. And for us, you know, a being, obviously not an animal, I just did the monkey video not that long ago, a being on this planet that doesn't have fur, being warm when it's cold is important to us. So, you know, something like the sun or a fire means something to us on a very innate level. So that's what I came up with. You may have another idea of why, you know, that this, maybe because it's shiny, you know, what attracts us to this particular element. All right. Something else about it that's interesting is that on the chemical, what am I trying to say? The table of elements, gold has a high number. It's 74 amongst the metals as a solid. There are other metals that, you know, exist in a liquid form and a gaseous form and whatever, but gold as a solid metal has a high chemical number. And it is also a very stable metal. It's solid at room temperature, but it does not react with many, many kinds of acid. And so that was a test for if gold, if you were buying gold or trading gold, or someone was gifting you with gold, a way you could test whether it was truly what it was supposed to be was to put that, whatever it was, nugget, jewel, something in acid, and if it dissolves, it wasn't truly gold. So that's another interesting, and the term acid test comes from that, from acid testing a metal to find out if it truly is gold. And then it's also a soft metal, and so in some old movies you see somebody biting on the metal, and if they can see their teeth marks, they're like, oh yeah, that's gold. I don't know how accurate that is, but I've seen that done before. Another interesting fact about gold is, of all the tons that have been produced in the world, 85% of that gold is still in use or can be traced, can be found, you know, in museums and in jewelry and so on. 50% of the gold in the world now came out of South Africa. That's also a very interesting thing to me, and we will get to more of that later. So, when you talk about gold, one of the things you might be thinking of is alchemy, because for the longest time, especially during, I think, the Renaissance, medieval, you know, 1000 to 1500 time frame, there were people who considered themselves alchemists, and alchemists were trying to make gold from another element. So say they had lead, they knew it was lead, they would do things to the lead to try to produce gold. And a lot of chemical facts and combinations of stuff were found in all that searches, but there were also people who blew themselves up and, you know, got horribly disfigured by heating up things that would then, you know, spill over and burn them and stuff. So alchemy in general was, one, not successful, and two, could be harmful. And the alchemists had in their minds an element that they called the philosopher's stone, that when they combined it with something else would make that something else turn into gold. So that's been around a really long time. Now you may not have heard that in, I think it was 1989, a Japanese man made gold from mercury by bombarding it with neutrons. So when you bombard with neutrons, it's a very specialized scientific thing, and that is linked to, because neutron bombardment is part of what particle accelerators are all about. So I found that kind of interesting, because when you look at alchemy, that's exactly what they were trying to do. They just didn't have the science at the time to make that happen. So where were we? Yes, the neutron bombardment and particle accelerators. They're linked, and we'll get to that too. So another interesting fact about gold that struck me as the political world changes, isn't it interesting how the gold world changes? Because like I said, South Africa used to be the largest producer of gold in the world. Over 50% of the gold still out there was produced in South Africa. And at least the Second Boer War, which is between England and South African Boers, was about the control of gold, because Johannesburg and Witwatersrand were the location of one of the largest finds of deposits of gold, and then Johannesburg was one of the biggest producers, and just that whole thing, whole rabbit hole, you can go down that. But that was fought over control of that gold, because for the longest time the Boers were under Dutch control, but then after the Napoleonic Wars, the British took control of the Boers, and so there's where strife started right there. Anyway, you may find it interesting that the biggest producer of gold now is China, followed by Australia and Russia. Interesting, isn't it? And then we're like number 4. USA is like number 4, and Canada is number 5. And then a few other countries that are kind of in the running there are Indonesia, Uzbekistan, Ghana, Mali, and Burkina Faso. So have you heard of Indonesia in the news at all? Do we cover Indonesian news? Yeah, I've heard more about Indonesia in the news in the States than I would have expected to. The same thing for Uzbekistan. Before my husband went there on a trip for the military, I'd never gave it a second thought. And Uzbekistan is very close to Russia. Interesting things going on there. And Russian, supposed Russian intervention into our elections and so on and so forth. Interesting. So those are the biggest producers of gold, and they said China makes 455 tons a year of gold. So there's some information there. You may also find it interesting that the first gold in America was not found in that California gold rush in 1848. It was in 1803 in North Carolina. That was the first gold rush in America. Don't hear much about that anymore. I wonder if North Carolina still produces gold, and how much they produce, and how that affects their politics in that state. some more interesting things about gold. It can be used medicinally. It can be used in dentistry. It's a good reflector of electromagnetic radiation, and it has been used that way in things like astronauts' helmets and for covering satellites. So that's going to make it sort of important nowadays as a reflector. It's also been used as heat shielding in cars. One of the McLaren cars, which I think is a British automaker, had heat shielding made of gold. And it is also, and it can be used as a heat or an electricity conductor. And that kind of fits into the model, the theory that the Great Pyramid was some kind of electricity conductor, because there's gold and wire, and I don't know all the facts of that. I just know that some people have said the Great Pyramid may have been used as a large battery. So that kind of, to me, that kind of ties in there. So let me check my notes. We've talked about these parts of gold. We've talked about the highest producers. Sort of a side effect of gold production is mercury and cyanide pollution. The sodium cyanide is the one acid that gold can be, they use it to mine gold, to like separate it out. And mercury, the same thing. So that is, if you have gold mining going on, you may have mercury pollution or cyanide pollution, and both of them are really toxic to humans. So that's something to keep in mind. Gold for the longest time was a basis for currency until 1968, which I found kind of an interesting date because the Vietnam War was going on at the same time. And there was a collapse of the whole economic system. So up until then, everyone thought gold was great. And then suddenly in late 60s, gold's not great. And it completely changed in 1975. And you might find it very interesting, I know I do, that the largest gold depository in the world is the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank in New York. And the Federal Reserve Bank is not federal. Federal means government linked, and it's not government linked in any way. And that bank is the bank that holds the debt of the United States. That, we owe 17 trillion or whatever, that debt is to that bank. Is that not kind of interesting? And that in the U.S. Constitution, the Congress is supposed to be who prints our money, not that bank. And I think it was 1913 when the president signed into law the transfer from Congress to that bank to start printing our money and to run our economy. And we've been in debt ever since then. It's kind of an interesting thing to look into. That bank holds 3% of the world's gold in deposit. And the other place in the United States that holds 3% of the world's gold is called the U.S. Bullion Deposit at Fort Knox. And Fort Knox was a military installation. I have not researched it. I know Pastor Joe knows. I'm pretty sure Fort Knox is still a military installation, but that is where the rest of the gold in the U.S. is. And I'm assuming that that gold is owned by the federal government. But Pastor Joe will know for sure, and it's another something you guys can double check me on. The biggest user of gold in the world is India. And I don't see anything nefarious in that. I just find it kind of interesting. And so I've kind of given you all these little factoids, but there's still a couple that I haven't given you that really, really, you'll see the social and political implications when I tell you these things. Water under high pressure down in the earth can also, it doesn't make gold, but the pressure and everything forces gold into the water. And then when an earthquake happens and a fissure opens up, the water evaporates, but the gold is deposited. So earthquakes are a place where there can be gold found. and also fracking. Now, I thought I found out that fracking information from Wikipedia, but when I went back, I didn't see it there, so it had to have been a different website about gold. But I know I saw it. So a side effect of fracking for oil can be finding the gold that's deposited down there. When you open up the earth like that and the water comes out, boom, you can have gold, found gold there. So isn't that fascinating that the oil companies who already make millions of dollars from the oil may also be finding gold as part of their fracking? That's interesting. And then the second thing that really makes you go, is that fact that a Japanese guy with neutron bombardment made mercury into gold. Because we know there's a huge particle collider there in Brussels. It's Belgium. The world's next collider to be built, that's going to be the biggest one in the world, is going to be made in China. I think it was 2020, might be 2019. So if they make this large particle collider, they're also going to be able to make gold from mercury, and I think there's one other metal, I think it was palladium. Isn't that interesting? Because if China starts producing even more gold, they're going to change the whole political, economic flavor of the world. And it's something that I think bears looking at. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you go do your own research and find out some things about this. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention, should have done it up front. But again, I have a lot of notes here. What does God think about gold? Because that's what's important to believers like me. And in the Bible, gold represents two different things. Because the golden calf is made of gold, right? I mean, it's obvious. And that is a false idol. And that is bad. And then Moses melts that thing down, and he stirs it up in water, and he makes the people who were worshiping it drink it. So that was a punishment. Also, some of the temple, temple instruments are to be made from gold, and like the Ark of the Covenant has a gold covering on parts of it, and gold thread to be used in the curtains and things. So I think you get both in the Bible. I think you get it being used badly and also as part of, but not the whole part of, just a part of things that are supposed to be holy to Yahweh that were used in his temple. And that temple, again, has been destroyed, and the priesthood that went along with it, because they were corrupt. So it's just very interesting to think about gold in relation to the Lord now, because I haven't checked in the New Testament. I would think the New Testament would be where that would be, but I know our worship and praise, our praise and worship is now our offering to the Father. So it isn't, solid things that we're giving him anymore. It's our obedience and our acknowledgement and our praise and worship for him. So that's kind of an interesting thing too. Anyway, I hope you were blessed by this video. I hope you go and do your research, find out some of these facts, and then socioeconomic stuff. Where's the power lie? Follow the money. The U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, China. Just very interesting stuff there. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Bless you. Shalom.